Hello, everyone. Good evening. Hope everyone is doing well. In today's session, we are going to discuss some of the scenario-based question um, that our group members has asked in the channel. So some of them they have faced those scenarios in their day-to-day work. Some of the questions they have faced in their various other interviews, and the questions they have put forward is like how we can better handle those scenarios. So today I'm going to discuss about those scenarios, what could be a possible solution, or how you can better handle those situation-based questions. So we're gonna discuss some of the scenario-based questions which might be useful for you. All right. So in that context, without taking any much time into that, so let's straight away get into the questions, and then I'll also respond to that question that how you can answer or how you can handle those uh, that situations. Right. So one of the questions that our one of our group member has asked, like, describe a situation where you had a conflicting requirements from different stakeholder. How did you handle it? And answer these questions from a business analyst point of view. Well, that's an excellent question, I would say. So as business analyst, right? So encountering the conflicting requirements from different stakeholders, it's a pretty common challenge, right? So that's not something very new, but it depends like how you can handle such a situation. So let me give you an example which might make the things easy for you. For example, let's say you are working on a project to develop the customer relationship management, or let's say a CRM system. So in a CRM system, you have two key stakeholders. Um, let's say someone from the sales team and someone from the customer support team, and they had the conflicting priorities, right? So the sales team wanted the system to focus more on leading or the lead tracking and sales pipeline management, which is correct, but the customer support team prioritized the features for tracking support tickets and also improving the response time. So I cannot say like one group is wrong and another group is right and the vice versa, but both the groups are correct in their own opinion, and both the groups viewed their needs as critical for the system or the entire CRM system to success. And that was, of course, you have a limited budget and limited timeline constraint. So, of course, it requires some kind of a prioritization. So, the situation is like how you as a business analyst can handle the situations when this kind of conflicting requirement comes up from the different stakeholder, right? So what you can best do in this kind of situation is like first understand the stakeholders perspective, right? So schedule some separate meetings with the sales team and the customer support team. You don't have to have the meetings with both the team together, but schedule separate meetings with sales as well as customer support, to deeply understand their needs, their priorities, what are their pain points, and that will allow you to gather the detailed requirements from both the groups without getting any external influences, right? So understand the stakeholders perspective. That should be your first action in this kind of scenario. Then the second is like try to analyze the business goal, right? So refer to the overall business objective of the CRM project. The goal was to improve the customer satisfaction and retention, while also boosting the sales performance, right? So this context will help you align the conversation with the organization priorities. So there are definitely the roadmaps and all, but everything should align with the organization priorities, and also always analyze the business goal, that what is the outcome we are looking forward and how that align with the organization goal, and are we on the same track, and are we getting diverted from the main organization goal? So those kind of situations you should always ask yourself. Then the third thing probably you can do is to like facilitate a joint workshop, because at the first scenario you had separate meetings with both the stakeholder, like from the sales team and from the excuse me, from the sales team and also from the customer support team. And now it's time to facilitate a joint workshop. So organize some kind of workshop with both the stakeholders group and the key decision makers. Using the insights that all you already gathered, do facilitate some discussions to highlight the overlapping requirements and the areas where a compromise can happen, right? So it's not like both the things are completely separate and all, but there could be some of the areas where there could be some kind of an overlaps, and also facilitate such joint workshop to understand that is there a possibility that we can compromise in some of the areas and all, and that will encourage the collaborative problem solving, and that will also of course ensure the transparency, so the stakeholders will get some confidence that yes, the things are being transparent to us and we are happy to work in that way. Then the fourth step that you can probably take is like prioritize based on the impact and also the feasibility, right? So to resolve such kind of conflicts, use a weighted prioritization framework. For example, Moscow, which is one of the very well-known prioritization technique. So Moscow technique or a benefits versus effort matrix that had a high impact on both the teams, and the overall business goal were prioritized. So a shared dashboard for lead tracking and ticket resolution that could be identified as a feature that can meet both the needs from to some extent. So there are some overlapping areas. And then once you put the prioritization metrics based on the inputs that you receive from the stakeholder, so that prioritization based on the impact and feasibility will really make the stakeholder understand like why item one is much prior than item two or the vice versa. Then the fifth approach, you should be like always ensure that you create a phased approach, right? You don't have to do everything at one goal, but always try to implement in a phased implementation plan. Better to have that implementation plan also ready and make it available to the stakeholder. So let's say the first phase could probably include the features with high business value that address the shared priorities, and the subsequent phases can include the team-specific enhancement based on the available resources and also the budget. So that will ensure that both the teams can visualize that yes, their needs are coming up in the upcoming months or days, and that is also being addressed in the roadmap without they feeling like we are getting completely neglected. So create always a phased approach and ensure that is also being transparent to the stakeholder. And the last and pretty important one, which is probably my sixth advice here, would be like always communicate clearly, right? So after you finalize the prioritize, document the decisions, communicate to all the stakeholder, explain the rationale behind each of the prioritization, emphasize the alignment with the organization strategy goal, give some regular updates that was provided during the development phase. So those kind of things will maintain the trust, and that will also buy in some time for you, which you can probably spend with the dev team to ensure that the increment is happening in a right interval. So if you follow this six steps manner, right, that the one that I mentioned, just to summarize once again, like first you understand the stakeholder perspective, analyze the business goal, facilitate some joint workshop, prioritize based on the impact and also the feasibility, create a phased approach instead of going all at one shot, and then communicate clearly with the stakeholder. If you follow that approach, then all any kind of conflicting situations can definitely be resolved, and that's not a very big issue that I could foresee. All right. So with that, let's take the second questions that we have received from one of our group member. So the question goes like that, like provide an examples when you discover new requirements after the project has already started, and what steps did you take? Okay, so if I understand the questions correctly, like uh, give some example when you discover the new requirements once the project has already kicked up, and you as a business analyst, what steps did you take? What? That's a good question, I would say. Okay, and it's a bit tricky, right? So because not every project is same, and it's not quite a frequent. I mean, because we all working in a agile world, so change is definitely an inevitable process. And being agile, you have to be flexible to accommodate or adjust the changes because that's the business ask or the business need. So the way you can handle such kind of situations, like let's again take one example. Maybe a retail company would be a best fit here. Let's say you are working in a project to implement an e-commerce platform for a retail company, and during the development phase, one of the key stakeholder from the let's say from the marketing department realized that some of the loyalty program feature, right? Because when you're working in a retail platform, right, loyalty program feature is pretty essential to have the customer retention, right? Because the competition is tough. So until and unless you give some extra features, for example, loyalty program and all, so you cannot sustain in the tough competitive market. So the marketing team realized that a loyalty program feature is missing. That was not included in the initial requirement. So, and this feature is really essential because that would allow customers to earn and redeem the points. So significantly, that will also enhance the customer or the user engagement. So this could be a real good scenario, like the team realized once the project has kicked off. But of course, you cannot neglect this one to a very large extent because, as I mentioned, that the loyalty program is really pretty important to have the customer retention, and that way you can always increase the business. So, what are the steps that you can take, right? So, as a business analyst, like what actions you can take so that you can have a very constructive discussions with the key stakeholder from the marketing team. So the way I visualize this one, or the probably the steps that you can probably take, like first thing is acknowledge and access the new requirement, right? So instead of saying, no, we cannot do it because we have already started the project, well, that's definitely not a very pleasant conversation. So always acknowledge, yes, Mr. So and so, we acknowledge your requirement, and we are going to assess the new requirement and see come up like where exactly we'll end up. There could be some initial meetings, etc., etc. So always acknowledge the requirement and try to assess that what exactly the new requirement is. So do some meetings with the marketing team or with the key stakeholder, right? From where the new requirement has come up, to understand the newly identified requirement and clarify the feature scope, the objectives, at the same time some business value, and also investigate that why this requirement was not captured earlier, identifying the gaps in the discovery process to also to because if you identify the gaps, that could probably also prevent the recurrence in the future projects. So instead of straight away just accepting the new requirement, also try to put forward, hey, Mr. So and so, why this requirement was not uh, given earlier. Was there a real gap in our understanding, or that was something it was not a need before, but now that it has come up as a need? So those kind of things you can always ask to your stakeholder, right? That's then the second thing would be try to evaluate the impact, right? So because the moment you are getting a new enhancement or new requirement, there will definitely have some impact the existing process or to the stories or to the PBIs that you have already committed. So collaborate with all your project manager, collaborate with the development team to assess the impact of adding the loyalty program feature on the project timeline, because you have a limited project timeline, you have the limited budget, and also the resources like your dev team and all. So you need to do a thorough impact analysis, like, and that should predominantly involve like how the new feature would fit into the existing architecture. Um, Doing some estimations with the help of the development team or the dev team, what sort of extra effort it's required. Excuse me. And analyze the also the and the next thing you can probably do is like analyze the potential risk, right? Because as I said, like if something is getting in, then there must be something moving out as well. So that we tell in our way of working, like what are the potential risks, such as let's say delays in the delivery of some other critical features. So those kind of things should be part of your evaluation of the impact as soon as you acknowledge and assess the new requirement. Then third one would be, in my opinion, should be like prioritize with the stakeholder, right? So facilitate kind of a discussions with all the stakeholder, let's say marketing team, your operations team, then IT, your senior management, to evaluate the importance of the new requirement, right? So there are some existing committed PBIs that was already scoped in, and now there is something new coming up. So try to have the evaluation in terms of like importance of the new requirement compared to the existing priorities. So use some prioritization framework that we already discussed quite some time before. And so using the prioritization framework, you can say that, well, yes, we agree that the loyalty program was a high value addition, but at the same time, it also needs to be implemented without compromising the goal life date. So those kind of prioritizations ensure that the stakeholder are also aligned as per your thought process. Don't just give a surprise at the end. So any kind of new additions should be worked along with the stakeholder, because they are our stakeholder. They are the one going to use the product. So ensure that we communicate clearly. If there is a change in the plan, that has to be communicated clearly. So communication is also very clear factor, while you are working as a senior business analyst. And so that, in that sense, I would say, like, prioritize with the stakeholder. Then the fourth one I could think of, like, always propose some solution, right? Because from a stakeholder's point of view, everything is pretty important for me, but probably you know the system, or you know the applications better than anyone else, right? Because you are the business analyst. So try to propose some solution. Let's say, hey, Mr. So and so, your requirement is this, but can we have a two-phased or let's say phased approach? So let's say in phase one, which is the immediate requirement, we are going to launch the e-commerce platform as planned with some placeholder for the loyalty program, because that's what you are telling, that is really pretty important. So in the phase one, with the immediate launch program, we are going to have the loyalty program. And the phase two, which is after the launch period, we are going to develop and integrate the loyalty program as an enhancement, right? Because it's not like we are going to have the 100% of the features at the phase one, but we are going to divide it into phase one and phase two. Phase one would be having so and so with the basic minimal features, and phase two will have the complete features. So that way you divide the requirement. I mean, you accept the changes, but then you divide it into two phases, which can give some confidence to the stakeholder. Then the next phase should be like, whatever you are communicating with the stakeholders, getting the approvals after facilitating all these workshops and all, try to document and approve those changes, right? So somebody from the business should approve those changes before you can really take back as part of your backlog items and try to implement it. Try to have those things documented, and also the proper approval of the change process is in place. So documentations and the approval of those changes should be done in a very pragmatic way. Um, then next item could be, yeah, I mean, always, as I mentioned, I think important items, like always communicate transparently. That is the basic and foremost item in any of the BA changes or business analyst process. So any communications that is coming up in your way, ensure that whatever relevant for the stakeholder, they should be aware of it. And do some monitoring, follow-ups on that one. As soon as the platform launch is done, you closely monitor the planning and the implementation of the loyalty program. Ensure that the lesson we learned during the interphases, like, well, some features were not involved, but then we promised that to have it post launch, etc., etc. Do some follow-ups on that one. So that process we call like monitor and the follow process. So if you follow this kind of approach, right? So any new requirement that comes in your way, you can still gain the stakeholders' confidence without without stretching yourself too much, because that's also not good for the dev team. But at the same time, we meet the business expectations. So it's a win-win situation both for your team and also for the business stakeholder. And you play a very crucial role as part of the being a business analyst, I would say. All right, so let's take one more questions. Let me see. Yeah. So one more questions that one of our group member has put in the chat is more about, hey, so and so, can you provide an example of some complex data analysis that you have performed, and what are the tools that you used, and what insight did you derive? Well, that's excellent questions. Can you answer as part of from a business analyst point of view? Indeed. Yeah, first of all, whoever has asked this question, that's a real good questions, I would say. So when you say it's a business analyst, right? So it's not only a functional analysis, like kind of a, so the analysis can start from your system point of view, but of course, there are multiple label you can do analysis. And one of the key facts is like having a data analysis is a must in today's world. So until and unless you have the facts and figures in place, you cannot say that my data analysis is completed and we have done a proper analysis. So when it comes to our data analysis, there could be some of the key steps. Like first, you define the objectives, like what is your customer lifetime value, which is called a CLV. Again, this is something I will be telling from a retail company point of view, because that's a pretty I think with some kind of data analysis, the best example I could think of right now, that we are working in a retail online project and we have to identify that trends and optimize some kind of marketing strategies. So how we can uncover the insights about the purchasing patterns, customer retention, and the factors that could drive the high value purchases, right? So that the best example to explain this question would be to take a retail online platform as an example. So in that case, the first step I would say, you must take is like to define the objectives, right? So what are the factors that influence your customer lifetime value, which is called the CLV? Then segment those customers based on their purchasing behavior, because not all the customers has the equal or equivalent purchasing behavior. There could be a lot of changes between the customer segments, between the group of people, age factor, demographic factor, what else? I mean, there could be multiple things. So always try to segment the customer based on their purchasing power or purchasing behavior, and recommend those targeted strategies to improve the customer retention and also to increase the sales. So those three steps should come up in your define objectives step. Then comes to the data collection and the preparation standard, right? Because as it is more about getting that data insights, that means more into the facts and figures, I would say collect that. I mean, the data collection and preparation should be one crucial step, where you have to identify what are your data sources, like for example, transaction data from the e-commerce platform, then marketing campaign data from the CRM system, which is the, let's say, for example, Salesforce, then maybe web traffic data from the Google Analytics. So those are kind of the data sources that you could probably think of. Then what are the tools that you can use for those kind of analysis, right? So data analysis, you cannot do just an use of an Excel, because in today's world there is a lot of very powerful tools out there. For example, SQL for extracting the raw data from database, Python for the data cleansing and the pre-processing, Excel for initial exploratory analysis and visualization. So those are the things the tools you should use. So mostly if someone is new to the data analysis, I would highly say recommend that SQL is a must. Without having SQL, probably I mean, this just the structured query language is such a powerful tool, right? Using which you can do analysis like anything. And Python is mostly for the data cleansing, and if there is unstructured data, to make it more structured data, etc., etc. So Python is really pretty important, or plays a very crucial role in today's state. And then of course Excel, if you know the VBA, if you know the macros, that makes your life easy. So try to have those tools, use in your way of working. Then comes to the analysis technique, like so how you can analyze the things based on the data insights that you receive from step number two. So for example, one of the analysis technique is called RFM analysis technique. So for example, the retention, then the frequency, and what is the monetary value we are going to get. So that will help to do some segmentations of the customer segmentation, like high value at a high risk. And obviously we do have some potential loyal customer. So if we can really divide or segregate these groups in between our different kind of customers and all, so that we call, let's say, customer segmentation. So RFM analysis is really pretty important, I would say, and that must be part of your analysis technique. Then you can do some trend analysis, you can do some predictive modeling. So predictive modeling for that, Python is an excellent tool. So identify the KPIs, like the key drivers of the high value purchases. Such as example, like what is the product type, what kind of discount level we provided, so what is the time to delivery, So using those KPIs, you can always put some predictive modeling into that. And then the next one should be always try to churn those analysis into some calculated outcomes, right? So there is like some calculated rates and some logistic regression to predict the likelihood of customer discounting project purchases. So if you do that, then you know like which customer segment you need to you need to put some more discounts to have those customer retention, and of course that will help to increase your business as well. At the end, what you did until now is more about doing the data analysis, but that will not make any sense until that time you put it for the in terms of visualization. So for visualizations, Power BI is it's a very powerful tool. It's pretty popular in today's world. Then you can have Tableau as well, also to interactive to create some interactive dashboard. You can show some let's say heat maps that could show some like the geographic regions with the high sales volume. Then a customer segmentation dashboard, like showing the RFM clusters that I will just discuss about the RFM analysis, like retention frequency and monetary value. Then a trend line showing the spikes in purchase. Like you cannot have like in summer the spikes are too high, but in winter let's say the spikes are down. So a trend line based on the spikes in purchases would really be a good visualizations that I would say, we can have at part of your visualizations. So that's how, like, part of your data analysis, as I mentioned, first you define the objective, then put some data collection and preparation, then put some analysis technique like RFM, trend analysis, predictive modeling, churn analysis, etc., etc. Then the fourth one probably could be put some visualizations to ensure that what you did some analysis that makes some meaningful visualizations, and then the senior management can definitely take some call, well, where exactly to forecast. So that should be part of your data analysis as a business analyst. All right, now let's go to the next questions in this series. Um, okay, one of our group member has asked like, share an experience where you identified a critical issue in a project. What actions did you take to resolve it? And yeah, can you answer this from a business analyst point of view? Okay, so it pretty much matches up with the first questions that we already discussed, but it is more about some critical issues in the project management and like where we actually, excuse me, identified some critical issue in a project and what actions we can actually take to resolve it. So I think the basic fundament I would start with like identify and understand the issue first, right? So until as we are talking about a critical issue, like what is the issue exactly? So first you need to identify and understand that issue. For example, let's say during the UAT phase, you notice some discrepancies in the inventory level between the new system and the legacy system during some high volume testing scenarios, right? So again, this is more about from a retail point of view, or let's say an inventory management point of view I'm speaking about. So in an inventory management for a retail client, you are doing some project, and during the user acceptance testing or UAT phase, you identified some critical issue. The system failed to accurately reflect the real-time inventory labels during the peak transaction load, and this created a risk of overselling, or let's say the stock is out, so which could significantly impact the customer satisfaction, and also it would impact the revenue. So that could kind of a scenarios or example that you can definitely think of in this case. As I mentioned, as a business analyst, the actions that you can take is like, first you identify and understand the issues, like what is your observation. So during UAT, I faced so and so, blah, 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 some discrepancy in the inventory labels between the new system and the legacy system. And the investigations that I probably did, let's say, work closely with the QA team to reproduce the same issue, and also to confirm that indeed this happens during the peak load, or let's say the under peak loads or in the peak loads time, and what is the log indicates in terms of delays in the syncing data between the systems front end and the back end. So those kind of investigations should be part of as your the first step, which is the identifying and understanding the issue. Then the second step should be escalate the issues, right? So what do you mean by escalate the issue? So as soon as your investigation is done and you are really able to reproduce the issues in the lower environment, you must escalate that issue. So you should immediately escalate the problem to the project managers, to the tech lead, emphasizing like its critical impact on the business operation. For that, you could probably prepare a detailed report outlining the issue and the scenarios in which case it occurred, what are the potential business risk for it, and most importantly, some kind of recommendations. It's not always to come up with a problem, but what could be a potential recommendation in terms of addressing that one. So that's what we can say, like escalate the issues. It's not in terms of complaining or escalating, but making the your one level up to the project managers or to the tech lead or to the dev team, and ensure like everyone is aware on that one and put some recommendation to that one. Then that could involve multiple cross-functional teams. So now it's time to that you should collaborate with the cross-functional team. That could be a technical team, which is the dev, which is mostly from the IT side, and there could be some stakeholder which are also getting directly or indirectly impacted. So you have to have some collaborations between the cross-functional teams. The first step could be like propose some kind of resolution, right? So there could be some immediate fix, for example, optimize the database query or implementing some additional indexing that could improve the data retrieval times, which can really remove the time delay between the real-time data sync up with the front-end data or the front-end stock uploads, what you are getting. So that could be an immediate fix. Then do some load balancing, like suggest deploying a load balancer to distribute the traffic equally even during the peak times. And then the fallback mechanism, like proposed in integrating a temporary buffer mechanism to flag some potential overselling situations until the system is fully optimized. So it is more kind of a proactive step rather than some steps after a real incident has happened. So those kind of proposals you can put as part of your solution. Then you can do some testing, some validations based on your proposal and all. And the third thing is like communicate once it is fixed, and also put some that we call in a step called manage the expectations, right? So provide regular updates to the stakeholder, includes some kind of revised timeline and the steps that you have taken to prevent similar issues in the future. That will bring some confidence to the stakeholder. Well, there was an issue, everyone acknowledged that issue, and we have fixed that issue, but now it's time to act proactively so that it's not going to happen in the future. That is pretty important, and that's what we call like manage the expectations pretty smartly, and then adjust the project timeline slightly to accommodate those fixes, because as I said, like there could be immediate fix, there could be a load balancing fix, there could be fallback mechanism, it's a fix, etc., etc. So manage the project timeline slightly to accommodate those fixes, and ensure that the quality of the system is not compromised at any stage. Be it an immediate fix, be it a load balancing, or be it a fallback mechanism, at any given point of time, we have to deliver a real good quality product. And that's the mode of this project, right? So we must ensure the quality and the standard is not degraded, even though it's a quick fix, we are going to do that. So you have to ensure that right collaboration is happening between the QA team and the dev team, and everybody is really sync up in that case. So I think if you put this kind of action setup, then resolving a critical issues in a project, which is I would not say it is rare. It probably happens pretty quite often. So if your planning is not that strong, I mean, again, it's a agile way of working. So everything and anything can happen during the project executions. So better to prepare. So better to be safe than sorry. Okay, then probably the last questions in this series. Let's take one more questions from one of our other group member. The question says, tell me about a process you improved in your last role and what methodologies did you apply? Okay, that's a good question. I would say so a group member wants to know like what is the process improvement that we do and what kind of methodologies we have used. Okay, I think the best way is again, before you can put some improvement to the system, it's always good to analyze the existing process. So as is process, you have to know the as is process is pretty important. before you can put forward some kind of improvement. So analyze the existing process, do some observations and mapping, do some process mapping like using some BPN and business process model and notations, BBMM, to visualize the bottlenecks and the redundancies, do some data analysis more from a data point of view, because your facts and figures speaks about a real truth rather than speaking something hypothetically or philosophically. Then the second step could be like find out the potential opportunity for improvement, right? So some of the things can be redundant data or duplicate data, lack of standardizations in the client information, so delayed approvals due to unclear ownership of the task. And how you can improve those data accuracy and the collaborations between the teams, that is also important. Then put some kind of a designing in place, right? So let's say standardization, automation, or automations using an RPA to eliminate the redundant data entry, and defining a clear ownership of that one, like who is responsible, who is accountable, who should be consulted, and who should be informed. Using a clear ownership during the designing phase is really important, and we call that as a recimetrics. Once you are happy with that one, then it's time to implement those improvements. So if you are working in Agile, then put some sprints, some PVI, some user stories, assign some tasks, ensure that the focus is more towards the incremental improvements, and having the stakeholders on the right pace and getting their feedback, implementing part of the Agile process. You must do that one. Ensure that the workflow tool is really maintained. So collaborate with the IT team to implement some kind of workflow automation tool. It can be with a Salesforce, it can be with any other CRM tool, and conduct the training process, right? Because what we design or implement, this is new for everyone, right? So if we have invented, or if we have come up with some kind of improvements, it is also our responsibility to document that, and also to train the stakeholders. And that way we say, like, conduct some training sessions for the employees to have some smooth adaptations of the new process. There could be a stakeholder, so always train the stakeholders about the new process and all. Last but not least, I would say monitor the process, right? So you have your new improved solution. So monitor that, how is it going? Like, have some defined KPIs, and see that if those KPIs are really improving, and if that makes sense, and do some continuous improvement time to time, and having the feedback loop really active by doing some regular collections of the input from the end users, from the stakeholders, and also fine tuning of the process. So if you do that, I think any new improvements you can always find in an existing system. It's not always like whatever we are doing is on the right and correct, right? There is no such, if someone says that, well, the system is working perfect and there cannot be any improvement, that's definitely not correct. So there is always a scope of improvement, and we as business analysts should or must focus on that side, I would say. Way of working, and that helps a lot. So in today's sessions, I think those are the 5 questions that we discussed, and I hope that is probably helpful for you. And if you have any more questions or suggestions for us, do feel free to comment on that one. Ask your questions that you are facing in your day-to-day role and all, and let us know what exactly you would like to hear. And also, do not hesitate to come up with some suggestions, and that way we always learn from each other. So with that note, I would really like to thank you for listening to me, and we'll again meet in another sessions with some new questions from our group members. And until then, thank you, everyone.